Hello and welcome to the podcast. This is Ron's Amazing Stories. We have stories that should thrill you a little and chill you a little.
It's amazing.
What you'll hear are adventures sent in by you guys, classic stories from the pulp mags, and episodes from the golden age of radio. We have special segments like Ghost Stories with Sylvia.
That's amazing.
And Paranormal Expeditions.
I think we're going to have a lot of fun.
So settle in for the next hour and enjoy the show. One more thing. You just might want to prepare yourself to be taken away from today.
Another 5-minute mystery.
This 5-minute mystery is being brought to you by Ghost Stories with Sylvia. Today we talk about the dead visiting the living.
Does that really happen?
Well, listen to the podcast and you'll find out.
We have to listen to this.
If you don't, you won't find out.
Dash it all, I am resolved.
Police headquarters, Inspector Craig. What? What did you say? We'll be right over.
What's up, Inspector?
Plenty. That was Gregory Laurie, the art dealer. He just called to say he killed his brother.
Oh, hello, Inspector. I'm glad you've come. Something dreadful has happened.
So I gathered over the phone. Where's the body?
Body? Oh, you mean Alec? In the library on the floor.
Which way is the library?
That door to the right. All this has unnerved me completely.
I can understand. Come on, Pepper. You too, Laurie.
Yeah, not a very pretty, Inspector.
Shot through the stomach.
Jeez, he looks awful. His face is all twisted.
Twisted as it is, Mr. Laurie, there's quite a resemblance.
Well, we were twins.
Oh.
He turned up unexpectedly this evening, and well, you see, Peter was always the black sheep of the family, but he was my brother, and I killed him.
Please finish your story.
Oh, yes, of course. Well, as you know, I'm rather well known as an art dealer, collect famous paintings and all that, and sell them at a price.
Go on.
Well, Alec and I severed relations several years ago, long before he was sent to prison. We were very different. I was always aesthetic, loved beautiful things in life. I was happiest surrounded by my paintings or listening to good music.
Ain't it the truth, Mr. Laurie? It's the little things that count.
Shut up, Pepper. Go on.
Well, Alec, on the other hand, was more materialistic. He was only interested in acquiring money.
And he turned up here tonight?
Yes, he had come for the painting.
What painting?
That Botticelli there by the window.
Oh.
It's a rare original. You can see by the signature on it. I came by it through very good fortune. It's worth millions, of course. Alec wanted it. I refused. He drew an automatic.
Huh?
Pull the gun, stupid.
Oh!
In the struggle that followed, he was shot.
Ah, see. Well, then it was really self-defense. Mr. Laurie, if you're telling the truth, you haven't much to worry about.
That's just it, boss. This guy's not telling the truth.
What?
He's a phony, Inspector. This ain't Gregory Laurie, the art dealer. Begging your pardon, Inspector, but any dope could tell that.
What mistake did Laurie make that proved he was not telling the truth? Did you find the loophole in his story? In a moment you'll know, but first...
Yeah. Just what mistake did we make?
Wrong. You are obviously not an art dealer.
Oh? What was your first clue?
Anyone with a background in fine art would know about Sandro Botticelli.
Never heard of him.
I am not surprised. Your idea of fine art are pencil drawings of beer cans.
Hey, there's going to be a market for those one day.
And we all can't wait until you cash in.
Nice. Let's get back to our story.
And now, back to our mystery.
Are you sure, Pepper?
Certainly. The minute he talks about that genuine Botticelli, with the signature and everything, I had the guy pegged for a phony. Botticelli never signed none of his paintings. Any real art dealer knows that.
But, Pepper, how did you know that?
Me? Ah, it was nothing. I took a night course in art appreciation at City College. My wife thinks I ain't got enough culture. Boy, wait till I tell her this.
Well, it appears that you were right, my fine British friend.
Yes, Botticelli is a personal favorite of mine. The Birth of Venus is particularly inviting and represents his work quite well.
And I'll bet he didn't sign it.
Why mark art with something so mundane?
I don't know, so people will know who painted it?
If you have to sign, then you're not worth the time.
Just so you know, that doesn't rhyme.
That you say?
Hello, and welcome to the podcast. As I said in the 5-Minute Mystery today, we have another edition of Ghost Stories with Sylvia. Also on the program, we have a story from Joe, who lives in Illinois, that turns into a proper pillow fight. You won't want to miss this one. So let's get things going with this from our sponsor, Audible. Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook and a 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/Ron's Amazing Stories. They have over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, computer, Kindle. Whatever you have, you can listen to Audible on it. So what am I listening to? The Highwayman by RAS Salvatore, narrated by Tim Gerard Reynolds. This is an epic story written by a talented writer. New York Times best-selling author R.A. Salvatore takes listeners back to his signature world of Corona, introducing a fascinating new hero. It's God's year, 54, many years before the demon wars in the land of Corona. The roads are unsafe to travel. Goblins and bloodthirsty prowies search out human prey. Two religions struggle fiercely for control. Bran Dynard, a monk of a fledgling religion, returns from his mission in a far-off land with a book of mystical knowledge and a beautiful and mysterious new wife. But he soon realizes that the world he left behind has changed, and his dream of spreading the wisdom that he has learned is crushed. Here is an epic clip from near the beginning of the book.
Harkin cracked his whip with an urgency wrought of terror. Oren slumped next to him, a spear buried deep in his side, bright blood flowing freely, staining his brown woolen tunic a dark and ugly red-black. "Come on, run!" Harkin urged his team, and he cracked the whip hard again. He couldn't help but consider the terrible irony of it all. He had been transferred from the front lines of battle, in a war that had been raging since he was a young man, to the seemingly safe job of driving Prince Yeselnik about the growing lands of Greater Delaval. And now this, to be caught and killed on the road. The horses dug in and pulled hard, but an undeniable drag slowed the coach. "Oren, you hold on," Harkin cried to his injured friend, and he shifted his hands just enough so that he could pull back the slumping man, who seemed as if he would tumble from his seat. Harkin glanced all around frantically. He heard Prince Yeselnik shout, though the words were lost in the tumult. He heard Prince Yeselnik's wife, Olam, scream in fear. When the coach hit one flat stretch of the tree-lined road in the southeastern reaches of Prid Holding, Harkin dared to stand quickly and look back. The coach was dragging a tangle of logs. "Ah, you cunning beasts!" he lamented, for the bloody-capped Powries had hit the coach with some sort of grapnel, affixed by rope to the logs. Harkin's mind tumbled through the possibilities. He knew that he had to do something. It was only a matter of time before those bouncing logs caught on a tree or some other obstacle at the side of the road, and either stopped the coach or, more likely, tore it apart. He couldn't go back to free the grapnel while they were charging along, and he couldn't stop. He knew the truth. He had seen the bright red berets. He had heard the grating voices and the guttural shouts. These were Powery dwarves, and Powries showed no mercy. "Come on!" he called again to a straining team, and he cracked the whip once more. Good fortune got them through the straight section of road without any serious entanglements, but Harkin knew that the flagstone path twisted and wound around many stones and trees, down into dells and into sharp-cornered turns over ridges. "Bah!" he snorted in dismay, and he pulled back hard on the reins, bringing the coach to an abrupt halt. Before the wheels had even fully stopped turning, Harkin looped the reins about the bench seat and leaped to the ground. "Stay inside, my prince!" he cried to Jeselnik as he ran past the door's open window and around the back of the coach. He followed the rope to the grapnel and found it secured underneath the carriage. Cunning Powries indeed. They hadn't hit the coach with a spear or anything like that, but rather had set a trap in the road to hook it from beneath. Harkin started to bend and even dropped to one knee, starting under the coach frame to free it, but the thought of crawling on the ground, so vulnerably, with Powries closing, had him gasping for breath. Instead, he drew out his short bronze sword and began hacking at the rope with all his might. "You fool! What are you doing?" cried the prince, leaning out and hanging on the now-opened door. "Why have you stopped? I am the nephew of the Laird of Delaval." "We cannot go, my liege," poor Harkin tried to explain. He hacked with all his strength, and finally the rope snapped. Jeselnik saw it and cried out in dismay, and then he saw a spear come arcing in and hit the coach near Harkin. "Get back inside, I beg you, my liege," Harkin cried, and this time Jeselnik didn't argue.
20 years later, the situation has grown darker and more desperate. Only the Highwayman travels freely these days. He is feared by both the Powries and soldiers alike. The people need a savior, but is the Highwayman on a mission of mercy or vengeance? You can find out for free. Here is what Audible has set up for us. They are offering a free audiobook and 30 days to give you the opportunity to check out their service. This includes access to the included catalog, which is updated weekly with new titles. To download your free audiobook today, go to audibletrial.com/Ron's Amazing Stories. Again, that's audibletrial.com/Ron's Amazing Stories, and you can get The Highwayman for free. Thank you, Audible. And now, it's time for your stories.
These are your stories, sent by you, for you.
Our story for this time comes from Joe Sauer, who lived in Prospect Heights, Illinois, and it happened some 30 years ago. The story is titled The Old Ghost and a Pillow Fight. Hello, Ron. This comes from my journal that I have kept for years. But first, some background information. My dad wanted to start a family business. So at age 30, I moved back into his house so I could work for no pay. that's a story for another podcast. I set up in my sister's old room because my room was used as storage. I should also point out that all of this took place before any of the Ghost Hunter shows ever made TV. I noticed a few small things at first. While in bed, I would hear things that sounded like someone had come in. The floors are all hardwood, and I would open my eyes to nobody there. By the way, I always kept the door locked. These events kept happening, so I decided to keep track of them. If I left the closet door open with the lights off, I would wake up with the closet lights on. This occurred like clockwork. If I left the door closed, nothing would happen. The next thing is really odd. If I left the closet door open and the lights on, I would wake up to the sound of someone coughing. That's what piqued my interest. I tested this for a few weeks. The coughing would always happen, and I do mean always. Now, I did this for a few weeks until one night he appeared, an old man with a checkered patterned shirt, suspenders, and tan pants, was just sitting there in the corner of my room on a chair that I had. I thought it was just a dream, but it happened 3 nights in a row. That's not all of it. One night, I forgot to turn the closet lights off, and I went to sleep. I woke up to the sound of the familiar coughing, and the old man was sitting on the chair, but he looked at me and threw a pillow that I always kept there. Now this shocked me, but I wasn't scared. For the next few days, I kept the door closed, and I wondered if it all really happened. I decided to leave the door open and the lights on and placed a throw pillow on the top shelf of the closet. I woke up, and he threw the pillow that I had on my shelf at me and then faded away. I asked my sister if anything strange ever happened to her in that room, and she said no. I explained what happened, and she just laughed at me. It happened a few more times, but then it stopped. However, the coughing kept going. I decided to do some research on the house. I found out that it was built as a model home in the early 1970s as part of new construction. The owner died in the house when he was 80 years old. And guess where he died? Yep, in my sister's room and in the closet. I found it odd that the newspaper mentions where he died, but it did answer a few questions. Also, he supposedly passed late at night, which explains why he would show up then. I moved out a few months later because I left the family business. Prior to this experience, if you had told me that you saw a ghost, I would have thought you were crazy. Every once in a while, I still have a dream that I'm back in that room once again. Joe Sauer, who once lived in Prospect Heights, Illinois. Well, that's it for this time. If you have a story that you want to share like Joe did, head to the main website at ronsamazingstories.com. Click on the story submission banner, leave your story, give it a title, and tell me where you're from. I'll read it if I can. We all love a good story, but what we truly crave is a ghost story. It's time now for Ghost Stories with Sylvia. Sylvia Shults is a librarian and author by day, but at night, she becomes a ghost hunter. Following a lifetime spent in the pursuit of the weird and the strange, her nonfiction works include Ghosts of the Illinois River, 44 Years in Darkness, The Spirits of Christmas, Fractured Souls, and her latest work, Days of the Dead. We now cross over the veil and join Sylvia as she tells us more tales from the unknown.
Oh, Ron, come on in.
Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween?
Yeah.
What's okay? What I'm familiar with Happy Halloween. I dig that, but what is Happy Halloween all about?
Well, so there is this thing that happens here in the Northwest. I don't know if it happens where you're at, but here in the Northwest, people love to decorate their lawns and put special stuff out there with ghosts, goblins. Heck, my next door neighbor dug a grave, had a part of the head sticking out on one side and feet sticking out the other with a tombstone. We go all out for Halloween. Anywhere you drive, you're going to see massive amounts of Halloween gear all over the place.
That's fabulous.
Yeah, I mean, everywhere. But
I approve.
Yeah, and I know you would, but there's a problem.
Oh.
So you know how there's that transition that you got to go through between Halloween and Thanksgiving, and then Thanksgiving to Christmas.
Right.
You're familiar with that?
Yeah. Happens every year.
So what people are so into Halloween here, what people do is they transition their Halloween gear and transition it to Thanksgiving. And the way they do that is they take out the parts that are really scary, ghosts, goblins, and such, and leave the stuff that isn't so threatening. And therefore, you have Halloween, where you're transitioning between Halloween and Thanksgiving.
That's genius.
It is. For example, let's say that you have a ghost and goblin motif, and you've got ghosts hanging from the trees and scarecrow in the middle of the lawn and pumpkins everywhere.
Yeah, jack-o'-lanterns.
Jack-o'-lanterns. Well, what we do here in the Northwest is we take the ghosts and goblins down, leave the scarecrow, and turn the pumpkins around. Hence,
nice.
Halloween.
That is perfect.
And then, of course, you have the next phase, which, of course, is Thanksgiving to Christmas, that's a bit tougher because you got to go from orange and yellow and black to green and red. And that isn't as easy a transition. But that transition between Halloween and Thanksgiving is an easy one here in the Northwest.
That is cool.
How do you do it there in your hometown?
Well, here in the Midwest, there are a few people that go all out for Halloween. I would love to be one of those people because I have an attic full of Halloween decorations, of course, because it's me. But I'm usually working on a book and don't have time to put all this out. And I really get excited about it. And then it's like October 29th and it's a little too late to do all that fancy decorating at that point. So I just say, maybe next year. And then all of my neighbors, here in the Midwest, we really go in for Christmas decorations. So my neighbors to either side of me have put their Christmas trees up already. I noticed them yesterday. And that's not even to say that they weren't up before then.
Okay. So what you're telling me is that Thanksgiving has less importance in the Midwest than it does here in the Northwest.
I'm afraid so, yeah.
That's interesting because you're closer to where it all began.
Right.
I mean, we're as far removed from Plymouth Rock as you can be.
Mm-hmm.
But here in the Northwest, we recognize Thanksgiving still.
Yeah.
That's really
I
sad.
love Thanksgiving. One of my ancestors came over on the Mayflower, and I deeply wanted to go to Plymouth for the 400th anniversary of the Mayflower landing in 2020. And obviously that didn't happen. But I thought about Mr. George Sewell on the day and said, thank you, George, for coming over and giving me and all of my other relatives this opportunity.
Yeah. Well, I'm quite the opposite.
Oh?
Oh, yeah. So I didn't have any relatives that came over on the Mayflower. Or whatever that ship was. No, I guess that was Christopher Columbus, wasn't it?
Right, yeah. That's the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria.
Yeah, we're talking Plymouth Rocklanders. They didn't come in on those ships.
No. It's quite a bit before.
You know, I heard tell that they didn't even eat turkey then.
No, they had venison.
So how about that? I guess transitioning and changing, and it's all part of our lives.
Yes.
So the fact that you guys in the Chicago area don't celebrate Thanksgiving, well, that's on you. And I'm afraid that I can't support not celebrating Thanksgiving.
Well, we just don't decorate it for it.
Well, it's just wrong.
Oh.
That is just wrong. Well, Sylvia, how are you doing?
I am well, thank you. I have been working on a new book, and I have got some more ghost stories for us.
Ooh, for the book or for us today?
For us today, for our listening pleasure.
Well, that sounds exciting.
I figured today that we would talk about spirit manifestations, about how sometimes in that liminal world between the living and the dead sometimes visit the living, and sometimes the living aren't even aware of it.
Okay, then how do we know it happened?
Well, it becomes clear as the visit goes on.
Well, do you have examples of such things?
I do. The first story is a tale that comes to us from a husband and wife who were visiting the wife's old college at Cambridge for a class reunion. They were crossing the quad, and suddenly they spotted one of the wife's old college friends coming towards them. And the wife turned to her husband and said, "Oh, gosh, there's so-and-so coming towards us. And she's such a chatterbox, and I really don't want to talk to her, but she's right there in front of us, and we can't really avoid her. And, man, we have to make conversation." And her husband looked at the classmate approaching them and said that, well, they would just have to suck it up and be polite.
Mm-hmm.
And his wife said, it's kind of weird, but she looks like she's wearing the exact same clothes as she wore when we were at college together 20 years ago.
People do that.
Yeah, I mean, clothes last.
Yeah.
And the husband and wife kept on walking, and the girl just kind of went past them, smiled, but didn't start a conversation, and they passed like ships in the night. And they kept walking, and the wife said, "Oh, phew, I am so glad she did not stop to talk. That was really a good thing." So the couple went on into the place where they were having their class reunion gathering, and they were talking with one of the wife's old college professors. And they mentioned having seen this woman as they walked across the quad. And the professor said, "What, are you sure?" And the wife said, "Yes. And I noticed how strange it was that she was wearing the same clothes that she wore when we were at college." And the professor was quiet for a moment. And then he said slowly, "That girl committed suicide soon after you left the college."
Oh, boy.
Creepy.
Little.
Yeah.
But she wanted to be there for that event.
She was not about to miss her class reunion, that's for sure.
Yeah, I have a question.
What's that?
So, in your experience as a ghost hunter, have you experienced or heard of people experiencing anything similar during a ghost hunt?
Sometimes, not with a full body apparition, but there have been times when I've been on investigations that investigators have said that their relatives were with them on the ghost hunt. A grandfather or an uncle, something like that. Not a full body visitation like that, but they've felt the presence of loved ones when they were doing an investigation somewhere else where maybe their loved ones were never present in life. So, yeah, it has happened.
Any documented experiences?
No. It's just hearsay.
How about in from people that you've known? Has there been any documentation that somebody has said, hey, this happened and I knew that it was happening?
Well, yeah, there have been people that have mentioned aloud on investigations that they felt the presence of someone they knew was a loved one, and they recognized that loved one's energy. It mostly happens at seances, oddly enough, because you're trying to make contact with that spirit, with any spirits that you're related to. So, yeah, it's happened a couple times at seances that I've been present for.
Well, your story brought back something that my uncle told me, is that his sister passed away, and he had this habit of every year going to the graveyard. I don't know if many places let you do this, but she loved geraniums. And every year he would go and plant geraniums at her gravesite because she loved them so, and it was kind of his thing that he wanted to do.
Yeah.
And but he said one time he was planting these geraniums one year, putting them in the ground, and someone behind him said, "Oh, that's beautiful. Just beautiful." And he said, "Well, yeah, thank you, that my sister loved them." And then he turned around and there was no one there.
Nice.
And he said, "I can't prove it, but man, it sounded like my sister's voice."
Oh, that's delightful.
Yeah. Your story reminded me of that. So I don't know. But you said you had another story. I didn't mean to take us so far from the field yet again.
No, that's great. The next story is kind of similar. It was told by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, the very famous death studies professor, the woman who researched near-death experiences and what happens to us as we're preparing to make that transition. She was working at the University of Chicago Medical Center. And one day after a long day of teaching, Kubler-Ross was very eager to return to her office. So she got onto the elevator, and as she did so, she noticed a lady in the elevator who seemed familiar to her. The elevator doors opened, and the woman said, "Do you mind if I walk along with you for a while?"
Uh-oh.
And Kubler-Ross said, "Well, sure, yeah, that's fine." So they were talking as they walked along the hallway towards Kubler-Ross's office, and she knew she recognized this woman, but she just couldn't put her finger on who it was that she was talking to. She became more and more curious about who this woman was. It was just escaping her mind. So they got to her office, and Kubler-Ross opened her office door and invited the woman in. She said, "Won't you come inside so we can continue our conversation?" And she was still just studying this woman's face and her gestures, trying to place her trying to recall where she'd seen this person previously. And finally, the woman put her out of her misery, leaned forward and said, You don't remember me, do you?" She said, "I'm Mrs. Schwartz." And Kubler-Ross said, "Ah, yes, of course," she exclaimed, realizing that the figure was her former patient who had died of cancer the year before.
Oh, boy.
So she was very relieved to have finally gotten the woman's identity resolved, and she had Mrs. Schwartz write a note to the chaplain at the university, who was absolutely delighted to get it.
Okay. So where did that story go from there? Did she just fade away, or did?
I don't know. That's as far as the author took it.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's strange.
Yeah. But cool.
I don't have a story for that one. That didn't trigger any memories for me.
Oh.
But I guess it does bring up a question.
Yeah.
So, one of the things that you've mentioned about when you're on ghost hunts, and some of the funnest ghost hunts that I've heard you talk about are the one where there is a medium present.
Yes.
And so tell me about that a little bit. So do they actually see? You said some do, some don't, right?
Right, exactly. Some see the spirits, some only hear them. And whatever medium happens to be with us is usually very careful about what they say that the spirits are doing, but it's terribly exciting for those of us who are involved in this because we have no idea what the medium is experiencing, but he or she shares their experiences with us. And I have heard so many mediums say, "Oh, you don't want this gift. Yes, it's a gift, but oh, it's no fun seeing dead people." And I don't know. I mean, I haven't been personally blessed with that gift, but I think it would be absolutely amazing to converse with people who had gone before. I understand that some mediums, they experience the sensations that the dead person experienced as they passed, and that would be distinctly unfun. Yes, that would be very, very uncool. But other than that, I mean, you're making contact with someone most people can't make contact with and would just give an eye tooth to make contact with. And during a seance, when that's when you go into the experience with the intent of communicating with not some random spirit, but somebody you knew and somebody you were close to and someone you want to visit with one more time. What a gift that is, to be able to bring closure to people and give them one last chance to communicate with someone they love very much.
Have you ever been in a situation with a medium that you felt like, okay, this person is not getting it right?
Yeah.
How do you handle that? How do you deal with that part of it? You just go along and smile and say, okay, yeah, that's great.
Nod, smile, listen for your name. Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will never, ever, and I've said this before, I will never, ever crap on somebody's experience or what they're saying. I may call shenanigans on it privately, but I will never, ever put down someone's story or what they're telling me. They are telling me this in good faith, whether it's their impression, albeit erroneous, of a past loved one or an experience they think that they had with the other side. If I say to myself, well, I kind of smell a rat here, I'm not going to poop all over their story, you know.
No
and
reason
yes,
to.
I have. Right, exactly. There's no reason to. And I have been in that situation where a medium was telling me something about an article of clothing that they said belonged to my mother who had passed, and it didn't. It belonged to my aunt who is still very much alive. And I just, you know, like I said, nod, smile, listen for your name. I thanked her for her interpretation, and I just went on my merry way. No harm done.
Well, let's take this a little more far afield.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that I'm really straying now from where we were talking, but let's talk a little bit about automatic writing in terms of medium, a person that does automatic writing. And every time I have seen someone do that, I call shenanigans every time. I do not believe it.
I was just reading about a case of automatic writing. It started off with a Ouija board. This was in...
Well, before you answer that, tell people what automatic writing is, so in case they don't know what the heck we're talking about.
Yeah. Automatic writing is where you sit down with a pen and a piece of paper and you invite whatever spirit is there to kind of take over your fine muscle control and write whatever it is they feel like writing on this piece of paper.
Okay.
So in, I want to say about 1913, there was a woman in St. Louis named Pearl Curran who was playing around with a Ouija board with a friend of hers. And
Not
they, well, see, this is before the Ouija board became known as a portal for demonic beings. In the 1920s, in the early part of the 20th century, it was a parlor game. It was just a way to pass the time between sips of tea. It was not anything demonic. It was just kind of an innocent little pastime.
Mm-hmm.
And people didn't have that knee-jerk reaction to it. Oh, anything that comes through the Ouija board is demonic. So they were playing with this Ouija board, and they suddenly got a message that said, "Many moons ago I lived. Now I come again. Patience Worth is my name."
Mm-hmm.
And this entity purported to be the spirit of a Puritan woman named Patience Worth. And she started dictating poetry through the Ouija board to Pearl Curran. And it was very archaic, very old-fashioned in its language and structure. And what reminded me of this is that they moved. Patience Worth was so prolific in what she wanted to get out through Mrs. Curran that they soon abandoned the Ouija board and turned to automatic writing to get Patience's message across. And Curran would sit there and do this automatic writing while carrying on a conversation. And in this way, she produced, Patience Worth wrote a couple of novels.
Wow.
Through Mrs. Curran. And yeah, she would do this. Pearl would do this automatic writing while she was talking to reporters and not slow down, and it was all coherent. So yeah, that's something I would not call shenanigans on.
No, but there was a ghost hunting show a while back where they had somebody doing automatic writing.
Yeah.
And I was watching this and watching them, and they were pretty intent on what they were writing. And, you know, as a writer, you know that what I'm talking about. When you're writing, there's nothing else around you.
Oh, yeah.
For that minute, there's just you, the paper, or computer, whatever the medium might be, and there's nothing else that exists in that world for that brief amount of time. And so when you watch this person, you can see them intently looking and watching this. And I say, no, that's, to me, automatic writing would be what you described. She's having conversations and her hands going.
Yeah, that seems much more believable.
That it does. But when you're sitting there going, okay, da-da-da-da, and they say, well, I'm in the moment. I'm trying to get my moment and I'm feeling it. No. It's coming into your head and you're writing it.
Yeah, there's a difference.
And so I've always had a problem with that. Now, why I bring all this up? Well, Sylvia, I don't know.
It's interesting.
I feel like I feel like it's all related, but I wonder how much of the whole experience of, hey, I want to see something so bad that your mind makes it happen. As opposed to reality of the situation where you actually get visited. And how can you tell the difference?
That is an excellent question. And that is something I ask myself on a continual basis. Is this really happening? Is this just my imagination? Is this just wishful thinking? What's going on?
So I don't know how to close that out. I wonder about that, especially now, because, you know, having recently experienced a loss and how much I would love to see that person. How do you deal with that and not fool yourself, fool your own self? I don't know.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And the only answer I have is, would it be so bad to fool yourself?
No, not really.
I don't think it would.
I don't think it would be at all.
Yeah.
All right. Well, getting on to it, I know you have one more story for us, so let's get to that last story.
I do, and this is my favorite one of this show. This comes to us from author David Pitkin, who is one of my favorite paranormal nonfiction authors. He's just so down to earth in what he reports on that I really enjoy reading his books. It's from his books, Haunted Saratoga County. So he calls it the most evidential tale of consciousness surviving death that he has collected in his years of research.
Wow.
Right. He was talking with psychic Gail Putnam, who in the 1980s she led a meditation and psychic development group out of her home. Now, on a Saturday evening in October 1983, there were some people gathered for a class, and that evening they met at 7 o'clock, and they kind of got themselves into a relaxed, receptive state. And all of a sudden, their meditation was interrupted by the sight of 4 soldiers walking through the wall of her basement rec room.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. So Gail said she took charge of the situation, and she looked at the soldier that seemed to be the leader of the group, and she said, "Who are you soldiers, and why are you here?" And the man responded, "We're not soldiers, ma'am. We're Marines on patrol, and we're lost. We saw the light that your group is giving off, so we came here." And Gail realized that at that time there was no war going on, so she was kind of puzzled as to the Marines' identity, and she didn't know who they were, but she did realize that they were dead. They had passed on. So she very kindly explained to them that their bodies had died, and then they said they could find everyone and everything they loved if they would just turn, look over their shoulder, and see a bright white light and walk into it. This is a very common way that psychic mediums use to release an earthbound spirit. They say, look for this light, walk through it, you're going to find everything you need on the other side of that white light. So she watched the men walk away to a light that she could not see, but they obviously could, and they exited through another basement wall and were gone.
Wow.
And so she said, we just continued with the class, and at 9 p.m., everyone went home. The following morning, when Gail woke up, she turned on the news and was startled to see reporters covering a disaster. Terrorists had bombed the U.S. Marine barracks in Beirut, Lebanon,
kidding.
During the night, and over 200 Marines had died in their sleep.
Oh, I remember that.
Yes. The men never knew what happened to them. Suddenly they were without bodies and lost. They regained consciousness in the world of spirit. And apparently this also happened to a lot of the people who perished in the 9/11 disaster. What really clinched it for me later, said Gail, is that I translated the time of the Marines coming to my house into Beirut time. It was exactly the same. They were dying in Lebanon, and at least some of them instantly appeared in Glens Falls, New York, seeking understanding and guidance.
Wow. That is a great story.
I love that story.
And that is some pretty solid evidence.
Yeah. It's just amazing.
That is very cool. Yeah, I remember that. That was huge news at the time when that happened.
Yeah, I remember that too.
I remember it quite well. I don't remember the year, but I want to say late 80s?
It was 1983.
Yeah, early 80s. Okay. Yeah. Crazy stuff that was. I had never heard this story, so you got to wonder about that. I mean, what happens at that moment of transition? You know, you sit there and it's over, and then you would be confused for a minute or two. You would just have to be.
Absolutely, especially if you weren't prepared for it.
Or even thinking you were in danger, which was the case at that particular time.
Yeah.
So that is incredible. That's a great story. Thank you, Sylvia, for that one.
Oh, absolutely. And thank you, Mr. David Pitkin.
David Pitkin. Yeah, I'll have to. That sounds like an interesting book.
Oh, he's got a couple really great books out. He works in the Northeast, so a lot of his stories are set in New York State and in the Northeast region there.
What was his full name?
David Pitkin, Pitkin. I highly recommend his books.
He has a lot of them. Ghost of the Northwest, New England Ghosts, Spiritual Numerology, New York State Ghost, Volume 2, New York State Ghost, Volume 1, Saratoga County Ghosts, The Highest Mountain, Haunted Saratoga. He must have some links to Saratoga. Pretty good stuff. I'm going to have to take a look at him. I wonder if any of his books are on Audible.
Worth checking into.
That's going to be, I'm going to look into that and see if they are, because that would be an interesting listen. Mm-hmm. I will look him up on Audible. All right, Sylvia. Well, let's move on and talk a little bit about the blog this time. As you know, Sylvia puts out a blog each week with a very short, very interesting tidbit of interest for people. And this week's is a golden retriever in California gave birth to a puppy with green fur. Its owner named the puppy Wasabi. On the cuteness factor alone, it's a pretty great one.
Right.
Is there any, did they give any reason as to why the puppy was green?
I think it has to do with things going on in the mother's uterus as the puppy is developing. Not to get too gross about it, but sometimes the puppies poop while they're in utero, and the meconium is kind of greenish.
That's over the top.
Yeah. You can cut that part out if you want to.
No, I'm going to leave it in, but.
Well, no, and that would turn the puppy's fur green, and they grow out of it.
Oh, they do.
Yeah.
Well,
unfortunately,
along with that story, there is I forget where it is. I know it's in Russia, near where Chernobyl was. But there is a population of wolves in that area that are all blue.
Oh.
And the theory is that their diet was mutated or somewhat thrown off by the Chernobyl accident.
Yeah.
And so the wolves there now naturally have blue fur.
Oh, my.
So it's not unusual for animals to be born with strange colorizations in their fur.
Interesting.
All right, well, let's talk about your podcast. What's going on there? Now, I know for a fact that there has been a lull here in new podcasts, we do have one coming out, and you're going to tell us all about it.
Yes, it is. I'm still planning an upcoming episode on the Watsika Wonder, the strange case of spirit possession involving the dead Mary Roth and the very much living Laurency Venom.
Okay, well, that's kind of a different podcast. Usually you visit a place. Where did you go, or how is this one going to work?
Oh, well, this actually is the Roth house still stands.
Oh.
And
okay.
That is where Laurency Venom, after she was possessed by the spirit of Mary Roth, the Roths took her in for a while, and she actually lived there. And I did not think there was much in the way of haunting there. I just thought it was an interesting historical story. And I was proven wrong. We did have experiences there, and I'm looking forward to sharing that with people.
And that is what the podcast is all about?
Yes.
And we can expect that to be the next one, but are we still kind of not sure when that date is going to be?
Not sure exactly when. I have been working on a lot of different projects, including the 2022 calendar, the Days of the Dead calendar. That is ordered and put together and will be coming out very, very soon. And if people would like to order it, they can go to sylviashults.wordpress.com and click on the Contact Me button.
And get a calendar. Now, yeah. I still have my calendar from last year.
Well, it's still this year.
And I'm looking at it right now. It's still on my wall, and it's still my calendar of choice.
Well,
and
thank you.
So I am looking forward to the 2022 version. From what I've heard, it's going to be bigger and better than before.
It is, yes. I'm very pleased with it.
All right. Well, if you want a calendar from Sylvia, just head on over to sylviashults.wordpress.com and order yourself one before they're all gone. Hello?
Hello. I'm still here. I was just enjoying the animation in your voice.
Oh, okay. Well, I was done, and so we have a moment of silence there.
That's right. You'll take it out. I know you will. That's fine.
I will. Okay.
So yes, I don't know where I was going with that, but yes, calendars are available, coming soon.
All right. Now, I have one last question.
Yes.
You said you're working on a new book and you wrote 14 pages. What in the world is the new book about?
Oh, the new book is the first in a series called Grave Deeds and Dead Plots. It is
I know where this is going.
Oh, yeah. This is going to be collections of true crime stories that have hauntings attached.
Oh, I have not heard anyone do that before.
I haven't either. I'm very, very excited about it.
I was thinking the other day of an idea for you for a book.
Oh, yeah? What's up?
I was thinking, and this one, when you said plots, I immediately, my mind went to graveyard plots.
Ah, okay.
And I've always thought that you should do a book on haunted graveyards or haunted grave sites.
That sounds like something that would be worth pursuing.
I would love to read it because I know that there are a lot of stories of famous people that have been seen visiting their graves and whatnot. And I think that could be an interesting read.
Oh, yes. Benjamin Franklin haunts his grave in the old burying ground in Boston. Yeah.
Yes, I'm saying that there's a story there to be had.
Yeah.
Just collecting that and seeing what's out there. I think you would do well to do that, and you only have to give me an acknowledgement in the book for that one.
Well, of course.
Well, Sylvia, I can tell by the clock on the wall that it is time to move on.
Okay.
So I want to thank you for being with us today yet again.
Absolutely.
And Sylvia, it has been a pleasure, and thank you.
I'm so glad you stopped by. It was a joy visiting with you.
Now I have to go back, and I'm going to spend some time in your town and see if I can find somebody who still has some Halloween stuff up.
I'll bet you could find a couple. Not all the Christmas trees are up.
Okay. Thank you, Sylvia.
You bet, Ron.
Ghost Stories with Sylvia was brought to you by Gladys Goodies. I always have a great time talking with Sylvia, and I learn all kinds of new stuff. If you want to visit her on her home turf, head to sylviashults.wordpress.com. There you will find her blog and access to the podcast Lights Out. I will have links available in the show notes. Thank you, Sylvia. Gladys Goodies treats are a 100% natural, nutrient-rich treat that pets love to eat. You can get your treats and some really cool swag for your dog and cat at GladysGoodies.com. And don't forget to use our very own promo code RONS. That's RONS. And you'll get a 20% discount on all of your purchases. That website again is GladysGoodies.com. I hope you enjoyed this edition of Ghost Stories with Sylvia. Well, that was episode number 517, and my thanks go out to Joe Sauer and Sylvia Shults for making this whole thing happen. After all, without your stories, this would just be Ron's Amazing. If you want to follow the podcast or the blog, head to ronsamazingstories.com. There you will find any of the links I mentioned and how to contact us. Do you want to help the show? The best thing you can do is to tell your friends all about it, and please leave reviews or feedback wherever you listen. Clicking that follow or like button makes us grow. Thank you for listening, and I hope you come again to find out what are Ron's Amazing Stories.